If you were stranded on a desert island with nothing but the clothes on your back, could you survive? Today we present to you 8 incredible stories of real-life castaways who went to the most extreme lengths to survive. Number 8. World War II holdouts. After the Japanese surrendered at the end of World War II in 1945, 3 million Japanese soldiers were overseas. Many went into hiding on the islands they had occupied for years or even decades out of fear of capture, humiliation, or court-martialing. A small number didn't even know the war had ended and continued to think they were still fighting for Japan. They kept their guns and ammunition dutifully awaiting orders from the emperor that would never come. When Yoshio Yamakawa and Tsuzuki Nakuchi emerged from the jungle of a Philippine island, it was the year 2005, 60 years after World War II had ended. They told reporters they were part of a division that was devastated by US forces. Instead of fighting to the death like they were taught, they fled into the mountains and stayed there out of fear of being court-martialed for desertion. Prime Minister Kozumi said that they would do everything they could to repatriate them if they desired to return to Japan. But when a special envoy was dispatched to the island to confirm their identities, the ex-soldiers had retreated back into the jungle and could not be found, perhaps scared into hiding by the media frenzy that was waiting for them. Number 7. The Shark Hunters. San Blas, Mexico. Jesus Fidana, Salvador Ordonez, Lucio Rendon, and the 2 men who hired them set sail on a shark fishing trip. In the middle of their trip, they unexpectedly ran out of fuel. The winds and currents pushed the small vessel further and further into the Pacific. They tried to signal passing ships, but cargo ships rarely ever have anyone on deck. They drifted at the mercy of the wind for approximately 5,000 miles, subsisting on rainwater, raw fish, and seabirds. Ordonez was dubbed El Gato for his cat-like reflexes to catch birds that landed on the boat. The 2 men who hired them could not keep the raw meat down and perished after 2 months. Their bodies were dumped overboard. A Taiwanese ship spotted their boat on its radar and went to investigate. The 3 fishermen were asleep inside. The rescuers described them as nothing but skin and bones. Their vessel had drifted close to the Pacific nation of Kiribati, a former British colony. The men were taken to the Marshall Islands and taken to a hospital. They contacted their families, who had thought they were dead, and Vidana learned that he was now a father. Number 6. 3 men and a boat. The South Pacific is one of the most remote and least explored areas on Earth. Hundreds or even thousands of miles lie between the clusters of islands, making navigation extremely dangerous. 3 men on a pleasure cruise decided to explore a few miles from the island they were staying on, but one of the frequent tropical storms capsized their boat and threw the men into the ocean. They swam for over 2 miles before they reached the deserted island. The men made a fire and had to live on the island for 3 days before a US Navy plane spotted the smoke coming up from the island. When it flew closer, the pilot saw 3 men waving orange life vests and had the word "help" spelled out in palm fronds. The pilot radioed the Coast Guard and the men were soon rescued. Number 5. John F. Kennedy. In World War II, John F. Kennedy was a skipper of PT-109. As the ship was prowling the waters at night, a Japanese destroyer suddenly emerged and quickly dispatched Kennedy's ship. 2 men were killed instantly and 2 others badly injured. The survivors drifted for hours on the ship's bow. When the sun rose, they saw an island. They found a piece of floating wood and used it to swim the 3.5 miles to tiny Plum Pudding Island. It took them 5 hours to paddle through the shark-infested waters to the island. They spent 2 days on the island until they ran out of food and decided to swim for a larger island. On the island, they found coconuts, which they lived on for 6 days until they were discovered by scouts and rescued. Number 4. Ada Blackjack. In 1921, a team of explorers were stranded on Wrangel Island, north of Siberia. The explorers were led by Vilhelmur Stephenson, who wanted to claim the island in the name of Canada or Britain. Ada Blackjack, a young Eskimo woman, was hired as a cook and seamstress for the crew. Ada took the dangerous mission because she needed the money for her son, who was suffering from tuberculosis. The plan was to stay 1 year on the island and bring 6 months' worth of supplies. The explorers packed 6 months' worth of supplies with the intention of staying on the island for a full year and living off the land, but they were unable to find enough food to sustain them and began to starve. Desperate and hungry, 3 of the men went off to find help. Ada had to stay behind to care for the other man who had fallen ill. Ada tried her best, but the man eventually succumbed to his illness. The 3 men who went for help were never heard from again. Ada was forced to survive on her own until help arrived 7 months later. Ada used the money she earned to take her son to Seattle to cure his tuberculosis. Number 3. Narcisse Peltier. In 1857, Narcisse Peltier was hired as a cabin boy on board the St. Paul, a cargo ship transporting wine from Bombay to Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, they picked up 317 Chinese men and departed for Australia. Rations soon began to dry up and the captain decided to change course for a quicker yet more dangerous route to Australia. The ship struck a reef and everyone was forced onto a tiny island with no fresh water source. The larger Rossel Island was just a mile away from them, so a search party was dispatched in search of water. But after they landed, they were attacked by the island's natives. Some were killed and some were captured. Peltier was pelted with rocks but managed to escape with another man. They made it back to the small island, but the natives pursued in canoes. They managed to scare them off with guns. That night, the captain and the remaining crew attempted to escape the island in a longboat, leaving the Chinese to fend for themselves. Peltier saw what was happening and jumped into the boat. In their hurry, they left most of the weapons and food on the island. They soon ran out of food and water and had to resort to catching seabirds to eat and drinking their own urine. After traveling for 12 days and 750 miles, they made landfall on the eastern coast of Cape York Peninsula. Accounts vary as to what happened after they went ashore, but Peltier was somehow left behind by his group, but was discovered by a group of native women who took him in and was adopted by one of the men. On the 11th of April 1875, a ship came to the island and some men were sent ashore to find water. They came across a group of Aborigines with a white man among them. They reported the encounter to the captain, who sent his men back with some things to barter for Peltier's release. They made the trade and Peltier went with the men. However, Peltier did not want to leave his Aboriginal family. He was returned to France and the civilized world. Back home, he was offered a job in a traveling circus, but refused when he found out he was going to be one of the attractions. He later got work as a lighthouse keeper and married. Number 2. The Robertson family. Facing hardships on their farm in England, Dougal Robertson sold everything they had and packed the family of 5, plus a hitchhiker, on their 43-foot schooner. Their mission was to sail around the world. They set sail in January 1971. After surviving a fierce storm, they sailed for 18 months before their ordeal really began. 200 miles from the Galapagos Islands, their schooner was hit by a pod of migrating killer whales. The ship sank in minutes, forcing the family to their inflatable dinghy with enough water for 10 days. On the 17th day, the dinghy deflated and they were forced into their even smaller lifeboat. The boat was so overwhelmed that it could not stay above the waterline. The family had to stand in water up to their waist while taking turns sitting on the only dry seat. For food, they hunted sea turtles using a spear fashioned out of a paddle. The only water they had was rainwater collected in the boat, but it was contaminated by turtle blood and entrails. Lynn, the mother, was a nurse and knew that drinking the contaminated water would be poisonous, so she convinced her husband and 3 children that the only way to ingest the water was rectally, using enemas made from rubber tubing. When taken rectally, the water bypasses the digestive system but is still absorbed by the body. On July the 23rd, 1972, they were finally rescued by a Japanese ship after they saw their flare. Number 1. Salvador Alvarenga. November 17, 2012, Costa Azul, Mexico. Salvador Alvarenga, 35, and Ezequiel Cordoba, 22, set out on what was supposed to be a 2-day fishing trip. But once they got far from shore, Alvarenga saw a storm approaching. He had been through storms before, so he did not fear this one. The duo was battered by high winds and heavy rain. Since the boat had no roof, they had to continuously bail out the water. And when the engine went out, they were at the mercy of Mother Nature. The storm raged for 7 days. Alvarenga made the decision to dump the 1,000 pounds of fish they had caught to lighten the boat. Once all the fish was thrown over, they flipped the icebox upside down over top of them to shield them from the rain. When the storm finally stopped, they knew they had drifted far from Mexico. Within days, they were forced to drink their own urine to stay hydrated. A skilled fisherman, Alvarenga caught fish with his bare hands to keep him and Cordoba alive. When seabirds would land on their boat, they killed them, ate it raw, and drank their blood. Cordoba was repulsed by the raw meat and soon stopped stopped eating altogether. He often cried about missing his mother and her cooking. He made Alvarenga promise that if he survived, to go visit his mother. Within days, Cordoba was too weak to even lift a bottle of water to his mouth. He died soon after. Alvarenga propped his body up and began to talk to him, asking him questions and answering them in his own voice. After 6 days of talking to the corpse, he finally realized what he was doing, and to preserve his own sanity, he dumped the body overboard. For several days, he contemplated suicide, jealous that his friend had died, but he was left to suffer. Only his faith in God and fear of hell kept him from killing himself. One day, he looked up and saw a swarm of seabirds, and soon he saw an island. When his boat drifted close enough, he dove in and swam to shore. He laid upon the beach, feeling land for the first time in over a year. He was discovered by a couple who had a beach house on the island. They called for help, and Alvarenga was rescued after 438 days and 6,700 miles. But as the story spread across the world, skeptics began to question the accuracy of Alvarenga's story. But scientists say that his path lines up perfectly with the currents in that area.
Realizing the situation, observers on the boat above opened the cage's escape hatch to provide an escape route for the creature. Chan, on the other hand, dived down and slipped out of the bottom of the cage to escape. However, he discovered 2 other sharks swimming close by beneath him. Not wanting to become prey to the pair,